From Child Protective Services. We have received complaints about an unwed mother in an unstable living situation. My blood ran cold. Child Protective Services. What complaints? Margaret smiled triumphantly. I reported that an unmarried woman was attempting to raise a child in our family community. Children need stable traditional families, not whatever this arrangement is. Sarah appeared in the doorway, pale and shaking. David, what is happening? Why are they talking about taking Grace? Ma'am, please return to bed, Harold said officiously. We need to assess the living situation and determine if this child is in a suitable environment. This is our daughter, Sarah cried. We are married. We are a family. Not according to your legal documents, Margaret said coldly. And frankly, even if you were married, I have serious concerns about your fitness as parents. What concerns? I asked, my voice getting dangerously quiet. Margaret consulted her papers. Mr. Martinez is frequently absent from the community for weeks at a time, suggesting military deployment or other unstable employment. Mrs. Collins appears to have no visible means of support. The household shows signs of financial instability. I am deployed because I serve our country, I said through gritted teeth. And Sarah is on maternity leave from her teaching job. Deployment means abandoning your family, Margaret continued. This child needs stability, not a father who disappears for months and a mother who cannot support herself. Harold Clean opened his briefcase. I will need to examine the infant and assess the living conditions. If the situation is unsuitable, we will need to place the child in protective custody. You are not touching my daughter, I said, stepping between him and Grace's bassinet. Margaret's eyes flashed with anger. Mr. Martinez, you are interfering with a legal child welfare investigation. We have every right to ensure this infant is in a proper family environment. What makes you think our family is not proper? Look around, Margaret said with disgust. Baby supplies everywhere. No proper nursery setup. Clear signs of an unprepared household. This child deserves better than whatever the situation is. Sarah started crying. David, make them leave. Please make them leave. Margaret turned on Sarah with vicious satisfaction. Mrs. Collins, emotional instability is another red flag. New mothers need to maintain composure, not break down at the first sign of scrutiny. You broke into our house at 6 a.m. and threatened to take our baby. Sarah sobbed. How am I supposed to react? A competent mother would have proper documentation ready and would not be living in an unmarried situation. Margaret replied coldly. That is when something inside me snapped. I moved closer to Margaret using my full height and Navy SEAL training to project controlled menace. You have exactly 30 seconds to get out of my house before I remove you myself. Margaret actually smiled. Threatening violence in front of a Child Protective Services worker. That is another mark against your parental fitness. I am not threatening violence, I said quietly. I am promising consequences for trespassing and harassment. Harold Clean looked nervous for the first time. Sir, please step back. We are conducting a legal investigation. Based on what evidence? Some crazy woman's false reports about our marriage status. Margaret pulled out more papers. I have documentation of your frequent absences, concerns about financial stability, and evidence of an unstable household environment. What evidence? Noise. Complaints about a crying baby disturbing the peace. Concerns about property damage from baby equipment. Reports of an unsecured infant left with an incompetent caregiver. I realized Margaret had been planning this attack for weeks, gathering any excuse to target our family. You filed false reports to get our baby taken away. I filed legitimate concerns about child welfare, Margaret corrected. This community has standards and children deserve stable, traditional families. We are a stable traditional family, not by our community standards, Margaret said firmly. Different last names, frequent male absences, financial instability, and now aggressive behavior. This child needs to be removed immediately. Harold Clean approached Grace's bassinet again. Sir, I need to examine the infant now. Do not you dare touch her, Sarah cried, struggling to stand despite her pain. Ma'am, please remain calm, Harold said. Emotional outbursts suggest postpartum instability. Margaret was clearly enjoying our distress. Perhaps if you had chosen a more appropriate community for your lifestyle, this would not be necessary. Our lifestyle? I asked. Unmarried cohabitation, frequent abandonment, financial dependence. This is not the kind of family our community supports. The two homeowner association board members, Patricia Webb and Robert Chin, had been standing silently until now. Patricia finally spoke up. Margaret, this seems extreme. Maybe we should reconsider. Patricia. Margaret snapped. We discussed this at the emergency board meeting. This household violates multiple community standards. But they seem like a nice family, Robert added nervously. The baby is not bothering anyone. Nice families do not live in unmarried cohabitation, Margaret replied sharply. Nice families do not have fathers who abandon their children for the military. Nice families maintain proper documentation and community standards. I pulled out my wallet. Here is our marriage certificate. Here is my military ID. Here is Sarah's teaching license. Everything about our family is legitimate and legal. Margaret glanced at the documents dismissively. Anyone can forge papers. The fact remains that your household does not meet our community standards for family stability. What standards? Sarah asked, her voice shaking with pain and exhaustion. Married couples should share the same last name. Margaret began counting on her fingers. Fathers should be present consistently, not disappearing for military deployments. Mothers should be financially independent, not dependent on government benefits while their husbands are gone. Households should be organized and prepared, not chaotic with baby supplies everywhere. Those are not standards, I said. Those are your personal prejudices. They are community standards that protect property values and family stability, Margaret corrected. Children raised in unstable households become problem adults who drag down neighborhoods. Harold Clean was now examining our living room, taking notes on his clipboard. I see baby formula on the counter, diapers stacked on the table, and no organized nursery space. She is 3 days old, Sarah cried. We just brought her home from the hospital. Competent parents prepare proper nurseries before the child arrives, Margaret said coldly. This disorganization suggests inadequate preparation for parenthood. Or it suggests we have a newborn and we are learning as we go, like every parent, I replied. Good parents do not learn as they go, Margaret said. Good parents are prepared, organized, and stable. This household shows none of those qualities. That is when I heard sirens in the distance. Margaret looked confused. Why are police coming here? Because I called them, said a voice from our doorway. Mrs. Patterson, our elderly neighbor, stood in the entrance holding her phone. I called 911 when I saw strangers forcing their way into your house at dawn. Ma'am, this is a legal child welfare investigation, Harold protested. This is harassment of a new family, Mrs. Patterson replied firmly. I have been watching from my window. These people barged in here and started threatening to take a newborn baby. Mrs. Patterson had been our neighbor for 2 years. She was a retired teacher who had always been kind to us, bringing cookies when I returned from deployments and offering to help with anything we needed. Mrs. Patterson, please do not interfere, Margaret said imperiously. This is homeowner association business. Homeowner association business does not include stealing babies, Mrs. Patterson shot back. I have lived in this neighborhood for 40 years, and I have never seen anything as disgraceful as what you are doing to this young family. 3 police cars pulled up outside our house. Officers Johnson and Martinez, no relation, approached our door with backup. We received reports of a break-in and threats against a family with a newborn. Officer Johnson said Margaret stepped forward with her usual authority. Officers, I am Margaret Whitmore, Homeowner Association President. We are conducting a legitimate child welfare investigation with Child Protective Services. Do you have a warrant? Officer Martinez asked Harold Clean. Harold shifted uncomfortably. We are responding to reports of child endangerment. That is not what I asked. Do you have a court order to remove this child? Well, no, but then you have no legal authority to be in this house, Officer Johnson said firmly. Margaret's confidence wavered for the first time. But the homeowner association has rights to ensure community standards. Homeowner association rights do not include breaking into people's homes and threatening to steal their babies. Officer Martinez interrupted. I pulled out my military ID and marriage certificate. Officers, I am Petty Officer First Class David Martinez, Navy SEAL. This is my wife, Sarah, and that is our daughter, Grace. We have been married for 3 years, and everything about our family is completely legal. Officer Johnson examined our documents carefully. Everything looks legitimate here. Sir, what exactly is the complaint? Margaret fumbled with her papers. They are not really married because they have different last names, and he abandons his family for military deployments, and the household is unstable and unprepared for a child. Ma'am, Officer Martinez said, keeping your maiden name does not invalidate a marriage, and military service is not child abandonment. Harold Klein tried to salvage the situation. There were reports of an unstable household environment, crying, disturbing neighbors, and concerns about the parents' fitness. From who? Officer Johnson asked. From me, Margaret said proudly. I reported legitimate concerns about this family's fitness based on extensive observation and documentation. What kind of observation? Officer Martinez looked concerned. Margaret pulled out a thick folder. I have been monitoring this household for weeks. I have photos of the male resident leaving for extended periods, documentation of the female resident being alone and vulnerable, recordings of excessive infant crying, and evidence of household disorganization. Officer Johnson looked at the folder with disgust. Ma'am, you have been stalking this family. I have been protecting community interests. Margaret corrected. Someone needs to ensure that children in our neighborhood are in appropriate family situations by spying on new parents and trying to have their baby removed by maintaining standards that protect property values and community stability. The backup officers had been questioning Patricia Webb and Robert Chin separately. Officer Davis approached with their statements. Sir, the other board members say. Mrs. Whitmore called an emergency meeting yesterday demanding immediate action against this family. They say she has been obsessed with getting rid of them since they moved in. Margaret's face flushed with anger. I'm not obsessed. I am concerned about community standards. These people do not belong in a family neighborhood. Why do they not belong? Officer Martinez asked. Look at them. Margaret exploded. Different last names suggesting unmarried cohabitation. Military deployments that abandon family responsibilities. A teaching job that barely provides financial stability. A chaotic household with no proper organization. This is not the kind of family that belongs in Sunset Ridge. You are under arrest for filing false reports with Child Protective Services, breaking and entering, and harassment of a family, Officer Johnson said, pulling out his handcuffs. This is ridiculous. Margaret screamed as they cuffed her. That baby does not belong in this community. They are not the right kind of family. What kind of family is the right kind? Officer Martinez asked. Traditional families, married couples with the same last name, fathers who do not abandon their children for the military, mothers who know their place and maintain proper households, children who are planned and prepared for, not just brought home to chaos. Harold Klein tried to distance himself from Margaret's rant. Officers, I was just responding to reports. I had no idea. You had no idea that you do not need a warrant to enter someone's home and threaten to take their newborn. Officer Johnson asked skeptically. I thought the reports were legitimate. Mrs. Whitmore had extensive documentation. Did you verify any of this documentation before attempting to remove a child? Well, no, but Mrs. Whitmore seemed very certain, and she had photos and recordings. Photos and recordings obtained through illegal surveillance of this family. Harold Klein realized he was in serious trouble. I did not know the surveillance was illegal. She presented it as community monitoring. So, you attempted to remove a child based on illegally obtained evidence from a homeowner association president with no legal authority. Harold Klein was also arrested for exceeding his authority and attempting unlawful removal of a child. As they led Margaret away, she turned back to scream at our family. This is not over. Children like yours do not belong in decent communities. I will find another way to get rid of you. Your daughter will grow up damaged because of your unstable lifestyle. Sarah collapsed back onto the couch, exhausted and traumatized. David, how could someone try to take our baby away? What did we do wrong? We did not do anything wrong, I said, holding her gently. Margaret Whitmore is just evil. Mrs. Patterson came over and sat beside Sarah. "Honey, that woman has been a menace to this neighborhood for years. She has driven out 3 other families with her harassment and complaints." "What families?" I asked. "The Johnsons, she complained they were too loud and their children were undisciplined. The Garcias, she said they did not maintain their yard properly and spoke too much Spanish. The Williams family, she claimed their teenage son was dangerous and called police on him constantly." Officer Johnson came back inside to take our statement. "Mr. and Mrs. Martinez, we need to document everything that happened here for the prosecutor's office." Over the next hour, we described how Margaret had been harassing us since we moved to the neighborhood 6 months ago. She had filed complaints about our lawn, our parking, my military vehicle, and even the flowers Sarah planted in our front yard. She escalated after we announced Sarah's pregnancy, I explained. She started making comments about whether we were prepared for parenthood and whether our household was stable enough for children. Sarah added, "She questioned whether I should be having a baby while you were deployed." She said, "Military wives should not get pregnant because they cannot handle children alone." She also made several comments about our different last names. I continued, she kept suggesting we were not really married and that I was just some boyfriend living with Sarah. Officer Johnson took detailed notes. "This is clearly a pattern of harassment that escalated to attempted kidnapping. The prosecutor will have a strong case." Over the next few days, the full scope of Margaret's plan became clear. She had been systematically targeting families she deemed unfit for the community, using false Child Protective Services reports as her weapon. The investigation revealed that Margaret had filed false reports against the Johnson family because they were interracial and had too many children, the Garcia family because they spoke Spanish at home and had foreign customs, the Williams family because they were a single-mother household with a teenage son, the Chin family because they were recent immigrants with suspicious activities, our family because we kept different last names and I was frequently deployed. Did any of this actually constitute child endangerment? Harold looked ashamed. No, none of it was actually evidence of abuse or neglect. I realized now that I was being used as a weapon of discrimination. The prosecution also called Dr. Jennifer Martinez, a child psychology expert, to testify about the trauma Margaret's actions had caused to the children and targeted families. False Child Protective Services investigations are extremely traumatic for children, Dr. Martinez explained. Children do not understand why strangers are. At 6 a.m., Homeowner Association President Margaret Whitmore barged into our home with Child Protective Services, demanding we hand over our 3-day-old daughter. She claimed our unmarried cohabitation violated community standards. She had no idea I was a Navy SEAL who does not negotiate with terrorists. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also, like and subscribe for more stories. The knock on our door came at 6 a.m. exactly 3 days after we brought our newborn daughter home from the hospital. My wife Sarah was still recovering from a difficult C-section and baby Grace was sleeping peacefully in her bassinet when the aggressive pounding started. "Open this door right now." A woman's voice screamed from outside. I looked through the peephole and saw Margaret Whitmore, our homeowner association president, standing on our porch with 2 other women and a man in a cheap suit. Even at dawn, Margaret was perfectly dressed, her gray hair pulled back in its usual severe bun, her face twisted with rage. Sarah struggled to sit up in bed, wincing from the pain of her stitches. "David, what is all that noise? Is Grace okay?" "Stay in bed, honey," I said, checking on our sleeping daughter. "I will handle this." When I opened the door, Margaret pushed past me into our living room without invitation. The others followed 2 homeowner association board members I recognized and the man with the briefcase. "Margaret, what are you doing in my house?" I demanded. She turned to face me with cold satisfaction. "We are here to collect the baby." For a moment, I could not process what she had said. "What? The baby?" Margaret repeated, pointing toward Grace's bassinet. According to homeowner association regulations, unmarried residents cannot have children on the property. Since your wife is not legally married to you, the child must be removed. I stared at her in disbelief. "We have been married for 3 years. What are you talking about?" Margaret pulled out a folder of papers. According to our investigation, Sarah Collins is not legally married to David Martinez. Different last names indicate an unmarried cohabitation situation which violates our family community standards. Sarah kept her maiden name, I explained, trying to stay calm. That does not mean we are not married. Prove it, Margaret demanded. Show me a marriage certificate with matching names. I do not have to prove anything to you. This is insane. The man in the suit stepped forward. Mr. Martinez. I am Harold Klein. Questioning their parents' fitness or threatening to remove them from loving homes. What about the long-term effects? Children who experience false abuse investigations often develop nervousness, trust issues, and fear of authority figures. They begin to question whether their families are actually safe and stable. How does this affect the parent-child relationship? Children may begin to blame their parents for the investigation, wondering if they really did something wrong. Parents may become overprotective and worried, which affects their ability to provide the security children need. When Margaret took the stand in her own defense, she made everything worse. I maintain that I was protecting innocent children from unsuitable family environments, she testified. The prosecutor asked, what made these families unsuitable? The Martinez family different last names suggest an unmarried situation and military deployments mean child abandonment. Even though they provided a valid marriage certificate and Mr. Martinez serves our country. Proper families have traditional structures. Wives take their husbands' names and fathers do not abandon their children for months at a time. What about the Johnson family? Interracial relationships create confused children who do not know their racial identity. Mixed-race children face additional challenges that burden the community. The courtroom gasped. Even Margaret's own lawyer looked horrified. The Garcia family. Speaking foreign languages at home prevents children from proper American adjustment. Children need to learn English first, not be confused with foreign languages. The Williams family. Single mothers cannot properly control teenage boys. Without a father figure, boys become dangerous and uncontrollable. The Chin family. Recent immigrants bring foreign values that threaten American children. Their cultural practices are unfamiliar and potentially harmful. The prosecutor leaned forward. So, you believe only white English-speaking traditional nuclear families should be allowed to raise children? I believe children deserve stable American traditional family environments that prepare them to be productive citizens. And you felt it was your right to destroy families that did not meet your standards. I felt it was my responsibility to protect innocent children from harmful family situations that would damage their development. The jury talked for less than 4 hours before finding Margaret guilty on all charges. During sentencing, Judge Williams looked at Margaret with clear hatred. Mrs. Whitmore, your actions represent the worst kind of discrimination and child danger. You did not protect children, you frightened them. You did not keep family values. You attacked loving families. You used the child protection system as a weapon of hatred and discrimination. Your watching of innocent families was stalking. Your false reports were lying in court. Your attempt to remove children from loving homes was kidnapping. Your targeting of families based on race, ethnicity, and military status was civil rights violations. She sentenced Margaret to 28 years in prison without the chance of parole for 15 years. You will spend the next 15 years thinking about the families you tried to destroy and the children you scared with your hatred, Judge Williams said. Margaret showed no regret even then. As they led her away, she turned to the families in the courtroom and said, your children will grow up confused and damaged because of your unnatural family structures. I was trying to protect them from that fate, but she was wrong about everything. Our daughter Grace is now 3 years old, thriving in a community that has become more open and welcoming after Margaret's removal. The homeowner association was ended and restarted with policies protecting all families from discrimination. Sarah returned to teaching and was promoted to department head. I completed my Navy service with honor and now work as a security consultant, often helping families deal with harassment and discrimination. The other families Margaret targeted have also grown strong. The Johnson children are honor students who take pride in their mixed background. The Garcia family started a successful business and became community leaders. The Williams family's son graduated as top student and received a full scholarship to college. The Chin family integrated beautifully into the community while keeping their cultural traditions. Most importantly, Grace grows up knowing that love makes a family, not random rules about names, traditions, or appearances. Margaret Whitmore thought she could decide which families deserve to exist and which children deserve protection. Instead, she created a stronger, more united community where every family is valued and protected. She sits in her prison cell serving 28 years for trying to steal babies from loving families. Meanwhile, the children she tried to protect from unsuitable families are growing up surrounded by variety, acceptance, and true love. In the end, Margaret learned that when you attack innocent families, you face the full force of justice. And when you mess with a Navy SEAL's family, you discover that some fights you cannot win. Justice was served not because of my military training, but because a community decided that every child deserves to grow up in a loving family, no matter what that family looks like. And that made all the